Hello, everybody. Hi.
Hi, Mui Han.
Hi. Welcome back to another show. And today we are very excited to have with us Shahryn. Maybe I'll just get Taranjeet to do a quick introduction of Shahryn and then let's dive into it because there's so many things to talk about.
Absolutely. Thank you, Mui Han. We have the absolute delight of having Shahryn Azmi here today with us in Elephant in the Room. Shahryn has lived and worked in 7 countries, held C-suite positions in a variety of areas, whether it be strategic consulting, whether it be in pharmaceutical research, telecommunications, as well as oil and gas, theme park, and IT advisory and design and development. Interestingly enough, Shahryn has also worked with the PM's office for the improvement of public service delivery. And in 2014, he was recruited into Khazanah to specifically lead and manage the Corporate Development Center, CDC as we call it, which came to prominence during the restructuring of our national airline. Shahryn has been laid off twice in the industry collapse in IT, as well as in the oil and gas, and he's been at the receiving end for company closures, interestingly enough. I have known Shahryn professionally and personally now for several years during our earlier days with the airline that was we were undergoing the restructuring. Shahryn, it's our honor and privilege to have you with us in Elephant in the Room. Shahryn, welcome.
Thank you, Taranjeet.
Excellent. So let's dive straight into it. Let's talk about your considered opinion and your perspectives around the landscape. There's so much of uncertainty in the air today, Shahryn. What are your thoughts about what the coming months will look like very quickly from an employee's perspective, if you could do that for us?
I think that one slight correction I might make from the early comments you made was actually I've been laid off in total about 5 times. So so my first time I was in my early 20s, and the last time I was I had just turned 40. It doesn't get easier with age. It's unpleasant any time that it happens, but obviously it gets worse as you get older and you have family responsibilities, financial commitments, and so on. With regards to what the landscape looks like at the moment, I think there are a lot of people very nervous. As you look at the US numbers, they are already looking at well over 20 million people who have already signed up for unemployment benefits in the US. And if you're looking at that, they'll probably be nudging something like about a 10% unemployment rate in the US. MIER recently put out a report, and I think you might have seen that estimates run anything up to about 2 million new unemployed people locally in Malaysia. If you take Malaysia out of it, I think every country is going to be very badly hit by the fact that they've had economic shutdowns, they've had operational shutdowns, and people just are unable to get to work, and companies are getting absolutely hammered, whatever business they're in. From an employee's perspective, honestly, I would be quite nervous. I think I would really prepare for the worst. We do have a tendency as humans, I think, to do a bit of the head in the sand ostrich thing and assume that it would never happen to me. And I think you have to take the view that it will happen to you. And if it doesn't happen to you, that's great. Thank God for that. But the chances are you have a much greater probability now post COVID-19 that somebody's going to be tapping you on the shoulder and say, sorry, but the reality is we don't have the ability to carry as large a number of people. So it's a scary time. It is definitely a scary time.
Okay, now that's really really interesting, because we've had guests yesterday. We had Hira Singh coming in and talking about some of the checklists that needs to be looked at as employers are going through this process. Last week we had the distinct pleasure of having Dharman Sivalingam on board, talking about it, and we know Dharman quite well as well, talking about his experiences and what we need to look out for. Today, I think the focus is going to be very much on the individual. You've mentioned very clearly about the US figures, you've mentioned about MIER, and you've mentioned about yourself, your own personal experience of 5 times. Now, could I request for us to dive straight into this, if it's okay with you, Shahryn?
Sure.
What would be some of the 2 or 3 things that you feel would be absolutely critical as we start looking at this? And I don't want to be morbid. This is not at all something around that. This is reality that is looking at us straight in the eye, and we need to look at reality in the eye in this regard. So what would be the 1 or 2, 3 things that you can recommend and suggest we look to do?
Well, I think the first thing is if you were to look at the impact on an individual, the individuals is going to experience a number of things. Psychologists call it the grief curve. You may also know it as the Sarah curve, SARAH. And essentially, that is shock at being tapped that you no longer have your job. Anger at that event happening. Are the rejection, this couldn't possibly happen to me. And you have to go through the shock, the anger, the rejection before you get to the acceptance and then finally healing from that. One of the things that people frequently ask, because of the business that the CDC is in, how long does it take an employee, an individual, to move from the shock to the healing? And my answer is, anywhere from 30 minutes to 30 years. There are stories that people, they bear a grudge forever, and they never, say, for instance, if they're working for a consumer goods company, and the wonder of a market like ours is that we have choices. So you get released by your employer. You just decide that you and your family and your friends and your neighbors will never buy from them ever again, ever. Why should you? Because they did a bad thing to you. So the shock, the anger, the rejection, the acceptance, and then finally the healing. A lot of stages to go through, and those are ones that you will go through, and you don't go through them once. You may actually yo-yo between several of those stages, go back and forth, and eventually be able to be in condition to move on. The ability to recognize that those are stages that you're going to go through are critical, because somebody will, if you're going to go to an interview, or if you're trying to pitch a potential employer, the challenge really is that they'll say, tell me about your last position. And you shouldn't be spewing a lot of anger, negativity, and hatred, because all you'll do is you'll panic your future employer, and they'll be like, "Oh my God, why would I want to hire somebody who is so negative?" So that is clearly one. If you haven't managed that those sentiments, the other one, of course, is that you sit there and you emotionally collapse, and you cry for half an hour. That's also unhelpful. So the fact that you have to get through these,
that's very, very pertinent, and I think from somebody like yourself who have gone through it 5 times, like you say, I think it is even more carry a lot of weight, your experience and your advice. And I really thankful that you are here to share with our audience, because I know many out there today, maybe pondering which questions. I'm more for those who are very worried currently for their self that they may undergo this. Of course, we have also friends and associates who have gone through retrenchment or are even going through retrenchment. And I think your Sarah explanation was wonderful. Maybe before I proceed on, I just want to have a shout out to people that are on today. Definitely, Dr. Mike, thanks for tuning in. Hi, Zorab. Hi, Kat. Hi, Jion. As well as we have Hilson and Jack. Just watch your show just now. Wonderful job. Keep it up, right? As well as, Ben as well. Ben, thank you for your support. So maybe one question to ask you on a more personal note, I think, and this is something that probably shock is one thing, but I think the greater fear always comes after the shock that you have been released. How do you actually go back, and maybe you can walk us through your own experience the first time when you got laid off or let go? How do you go back to your family and tell them that particular news? I think that is the hardest thing to do for most of us, you are in that position.
Yeah, I mean, the if I can say it's a good thing. I got laid off IT in my early 20s, and I was fortunate because I wasn't married, didn't have children, didn't have a house loan, didn't have a car loan, so I didn't have the drama that was affecting all of my colleagues at the time. But it is really an issue. A quick mention, perhaps, that the work that I do with CDC and Khazanah, essentially, in the last 5 years, we've been working with well over 6,500 people who have themselves been released from their organization, mainly because of commercial reasons, never because of disciplinary reasons or anything, or performance reasons. But it is very hard, and we have seen the number of people who they can deal with it, but they didn't expect this to happen to them today. They go to work, and that morning, whether they're male or female, their spouse, their partner, wishes them well, and their children think mom or dad are their heroes. And the next thing you do is you have to go home and you actually have to speak to people and tell them that you have this news, and it's quite dramatic. And the issue is the overwhelming sense of hopelessness meaning no hope. So where do you look for hope from? And the problem is that your partner is likely to be either too soft or too hard, and it's not his or her fault, because they are as panicked as you are, and what they are concerned about is how are we going to pay the next bills, what happens. So they are either going to be very hard on you because they are themselves panicking, or they're going to be very soft on you because they feel that they need to be very soft and very giving, and they cannot do that balance. Your buddies will likely be buddies and be in that manner unhelpful. But the thing that is really a constant in this is the individual themselves, who is going to go through and try to have to deal with this. Hence, again, go back to the Sarah curve, the shock, the anger, the rejection. You really have to move yourself to a point where you very quickly deal with this. Because if you think of the classic iceberg picture, most jobs that you are going to encounter in the open market is literally the top of the iceberg. 90% of the job opportunities out there are hidden. You will not see those. So what happens is you have to go out and network. So you have to network by contacting people who you have not contacted, people that you have known forever, and you have to speak to them and say, look, I'm just out of a job. Is there anything at your company? And they may not know, they may not know, but now you have to let a lot of people know that thing that you didn't want to tell anybody because it's so embarrassing. But I think what COVID has done for everybody actually is that it's brought to the front the fact that if you did lose your job, it is very likely because of a universal problem, and it's not because of you. And that's huge, because prior to this, it would always be, it's because of you,
So that is absolutely brilliant, Shahryn. One of our listeners, Dr. Michael Heng from Singapore, he raised a very interesting question. How can someone future-proof or retrenchment-proof himself in this regard? And it's a difficult question to answer, but I would love to hear your thoughts on this.
Can you be retrenchment-proof? I think the issue is not about retrenchment proof, it is about recovery proof. You cannot make the decisions that your employers will make of you, for you, but you're looking at recovery as quickly as possible. The recovery is really key. A couple of things that I will mention is this. People think of cranking out a resume. And resumes and CVs are very easy to do. You go onto the internet, you buy a book, and people tell you, this is where you put your photograph, this is where you put your name, this is where you do this. But they inevitably are a long, long list of what you did as opposed to what you achieved. And people go, what's the difference? It's a huge difference. They say involved with, ran this. Yeah, that's fine, but that's not an achievement. What people hire you for is what you achieved, not what you did. Because a lot of people claim that they did the same thing. So your whole document has to be redone, and it's a new way of looking at it. Because the first thing, in fact, is now, rather than look at this as a disaster, you look at this as an opportunity. The opportunity essentially is to say, now that I'm being forced out of employment, what could I do? That is something that you start by looking at yourself. And looking at yourself, you have to understand what your talent is versus what you just did. Very often somebody will say, well, what would you like to do? And people always describe what they would like to do in the words of what they just did. No, this is the time to have a look at yourself and say, actually, what are you really good at? And then they describe it in terms of job function. Not talking about job function. We're talking about you as an individual. I'll give you an example.
Absolutely.
One of my staff actually worked with a guy who was in East Malaysia for some reason. Anyway, he was out there, and she had this long chat with him. But to cut a long story short, what she basically did was she was really struggling trying to find him a new landing. And one day she noticed that he had a sticker on his car back window, and she said, "You were in the army. You were a sniper." And he said, "Yeah." She said, "I have no idea. What is a sniper?" So he explained to her. And what he basically said was, it showed that he had a lot of patience. That's what snipers have. They have a lot of patience. Very meticulous individual, because in order to be a sniper, you have to calculate windage, you have to calculate distance, you have to calculate other things in order to get that one shot right. Yeah. So he was absolutely very meticulous, and he had all this patience and so on. But using that is his talent. That was also, of course, trained into him. But then suddenly you look at this, and the opportunities for him to go and look for something are enormous, because you're looking at him being able to be very meticulous, very patient, and which is not something that we all necessarily have. So the ability to look at yourself and then look at saying, well, based on these qualities, these talents, what could I do? And suddenly you go from being what you just did, which is very narrow, to doing a huge number of things because of your not newfound, but your newly discovered talent. But what is really key today is, I think that people need to really open up their minds, be a lot broader to the possibility of different forms of employment. Yeah.
Excellent.
People say, no, I need to be fully employed. Well, there may not be a lot of those jobs knocking around. Oh, well, I don't know how to code, so I cannot be a gig worker. Well, you can be a gig worker. You just need to have a look at this and looking at projects as a possibility.
So one question. I'm cognizant of time here. One question from me.
Sure.
Now there are just so many people who are going to be impacted by the sectoral impact of this COVID-19. Hospitality, the area around entertainment, the area around restaurants. I am only one as an example of these hundreds and thousands of people. How would I go out there to showcase differently the type of experiences, the type of potential that I can bring to the table, Shahryn? And I'm putting you on the spot here, and I do apologize, but I think it is a difficult question which we need to ask. What are your thoughts on this, Shahryn?
I think that the reality is looking for a job, looking for a new opportunity, looking for a new income opportunity, to be very upfront about it. It is itself a job. You're talking about looking for an opportunity by applying yourself, 6, 7, 8 hours a day. You get up every day. Don't get up at noon. Get up every day as if you're going to work. You get down, you sit down in front of your computer, you sit down in front of your phone, and you start dialing and calling and so on. And you just do that the whole day. You break for lunch, you break to do those kinds of things for a stretch. But you don't finish until basically the end of the day. When is the end of the day? When you don't have a job. The end of the day could be 6, 7 o'clock before you run out of steam. Yeah. But you're talking about applying yourself every single day in that manner. And the more effort you put in, purely through statistical probability, unfortunately, it sounds awful, but you will encounter opportunities simply through the volume of contacts and calls that you're making. There is no way to get around the fact that you have to make that effort. It just can't.
Absolutely. Very good. And that's really sound advice. I just wanted to say a shout out to a very close friend, Christine. Welcome to the program. Mui Han, back to you.
Great, great. I think today is really a very wonderful honor sharing, and Shahryn, we are so thankful to have you because I think this is something that is lingering in a lot of people's mind, and this is a very big taboo that we tend not to talk about it, especially in our organization. I think this is the last question that you would raise with your employers or even your bosses or even your subordinates, depending where you are in the hierarchy. And I feel that that's why me and Taranjeet thought it would be wonderful to bring you on to actually share this. And we also invite our audience out there, anybody going through this experience currently, do share in the comment section or even privately message us, because I think I just wanted to put this out, and maybe Shahryn, you can affirm this. I think it is bad. It is bad that you are subjected if you are getting retrenched. It is never a good thing. But nevertheless, it's not the end of the world, and you will survive. And you are a good example. 5 times and you are still around and going stronger. And so I think that is very important that we reinforce each other. That if you know the feeling and you know what to do, you will come out fine in that sense, right? So I'm really excited, but yet I know we don't have time, and every day we got this same issue. But just wanted to also take this opportunity because today is the first day of Ramadan, and to all our Muslim friends and listeners out there, we know that you're going to break fast soon. We wanted to wish you a selamat berpuasa. I know this year's puasa is going to be so challenging because of the MCO and things like that. But hopefully by the time we come to Raya, it's really going to be a big celebration because we all can't wait for this crisis to end, so to say.
Yeah.
Okay.
But stay safe. Stay safe.
Last thoughts,
Absolutely.
Taranjeet.
Sure. As always, first thing, thank you, Shahryn, for being here with us. A couple of things for me to take away. One is the ability now to very quickly move and transgress from the shock and that whole area around being aware all the way into actually moving into acceptance. And the faster we do that and recognize it's nobody's fault, and certainly it's not ours, the faster it is, we'll bounce out of this in some form or the other. The other one is to be proactive. Absolutely agree with Shahryn there. I think it behooves us to do the right thing for ourselves. We can't expect others to do it for us because there are other issues here that we need to look at as well. So let's now be proactive in this fashion, make sure that we do the right things for ourselves and those who are dependent on us. And lastly, I think the whole area around keeping a positive outlook. It is, to Mui Han's point, it is not the end of the world. This is one of many challenges that we are going through. For me personally, it is the third huge crisis that we've gone through, starting out from the financial meltdown in the mid-late 90s to where we are today. So yeah, I see this as instilling a level of robustness as well as perseverance in our very traits that we come across with. Mui Han, back to you, Mui Han.
So thank you once again. Thank you, Shahryn, for being
Thank
with
you all.
us. And we hope to see all of you again next week on Monday at 6 o'clock. Stay safe, guys. See you.
Thank you. Selamat berpuasa. Thank you.